There is a particular kind of silence that grows in the spaces between thoughts. It is not the absence of sound, but the presence of something held back. A breath caught in the throat. A truth swallowed before it could form words. In this silence, we build our prisons, not with bars of steel, but with walls of memory we refuse to touch. Not with locks, but with stories we tell ourselves about who we must be. Consider the child who learns that certain feelings are dangerous. Anger that might push love away. Sadness that might burden others. Fear that might reveal weakness. So they learn to bury these feelings deep, creating compartments in their mind where forbidden emotions can be stored away from consciousness. This is how the self becomes its own cage. We are both the prisoner and the jailer, standing guard over parts of ourselves we have deemed unacceptable. The very consciousness that seeks freedom becomes the mechanism of its own confinement. We walk through our days carrying this invisible architecture within us, smiling when we want to scream, agreeing when we want to resist, performing a version of ourselves that feels safe, while the authentic self watches from behind glass, unable to reach through. The dread comes not from external threats, but from the slow realization that we are trapped by our own design. The claustrophobia of being confined within a personality we constructed for protection, but which has become our permanent residence. What happens when the walls we built for safety become the boundaries of our existence? When the self we created to survive becomes the cage that prevents us from truly living? The paradox of self-imprisonment lies in its origin story. We don't build these psychological cages out of malice, but out of necessity. Every defense mechanism begins as an act of survival. Repression, in psychoanalytic terms, is the mind's way of protecting itself from overwhelming pain. When an experience or emotion threatens to shatter our sense of self, we unconsciously push it into the shadows. We don't choose to forget, we are compelled by a deeper wisdom that knows some truths are too heavy to carry in daylight. Dissociation takes this protection further. It's not just about hiding painful memories, but about creating distance from them entirely. The mind separates from the body, the present from the past, the feeling from the person feeling it. It's a brilliant, desperate strategy to survive what cannot be endured. Jung called this the shadow self, the repository of everything we refuse to acknowledge about ourselves. The anger we deny, the vulnerability we hide, the desires we shame. The shadow isn't evil. It's simply the parts of ourselves we've exiled to preserve our self-image. But here lies the terrible irony. In protecting ourselves from pain, we create a different kind of suffering. The suffering of fragmentation. The agony of living as only half a person, constantly monitoring which parts of ourselves are allowed to exist. The prison isn't built of trauma itself, but of our relationship to it. We become keepers of our own darkness, standing guard over memories and feelings. We're afraid we'll escape and destroy the carefully constructed identity we present to the world. This psychological architecture becomes so familiar, we mistake it for who we are. The walls feel like skin. The bars feel like bones. We forget that we built this structure and that we hold the key to its dissolution. To understand the psychology of self-imprisonment, we must explore the intricate dance between repression and dissociation, two sides of the same defensive coin. Repression works like a mental filing system. When an experience threatens our psychological equilibrium, we file it away in a drawer marked "Do Not Open." The memory remains, but its emotional charge is disconnected. We remember the facts without feeling the feelings. This creates a strange duality. We can speak of painful events with clinical detachment, as if describing something that happened to someone else. Dissociation takes this fragmentation further. It's not just about hiding memories, it's about splitting consciousness itself. The mind creates parallel tracks of experience. One track continues with daily life, going to work, having conversations, performing tasks. The other track contains the exiled material, operating in the background like a ghost in the machine. This psychological division creates what trauma experts call the frozen present. Time stops at the moment of trauma, and part of the self remains trapped there, forever reliving what the conscious mind has forgotten. The body remembers what the mind refuses to acknowledge. Tension in the shoulders that never relaxes. A startle response that fires at the slightest trigger. A chronic sense of danger with no apparent source. The prison becomes self-perpetuating through what psychologists call avoidance conditioning. Every time we successfully avoid confronting painful material, we reinforce the belief that it's too dangerous to approach. The prison walls grow thicker. The silence becomes more profound. But the exiled material doesn't disappear. It manifests in subtle ways, in recurring dreams where we're trying to escape something we can't see, in relationship patterns where we recreate the dynamics we're trying to avoid, in physical symptoms that have no medical explanation, in a pervasive sense of emptiness as if we're living someone else's life. Jungian psychology offers a path through this maze, the process of individuation. This isn't about eliminating the shadow, but about integrating it, bringing the exiled parts of ourselves back into consciousness. Not to be controlled or fixed, but to be understood and accepted. The key insight is that the prison isn't the shadow material itself, but our relationship to it. The fear of what might happen if we acknowledge our anger, our vulnerability, our need, the belief that these feelings would destroy us or those we love. Healing begins when we realize that the prison door was never locked from the outside. The bars are made of our own beliefs about what we can and cannot handle. The walls are constructed from stories we inherited about what it means to be strong, to be good, to be acceptable. There comes a moment in every prison story when the captive realizes they hold the key. This moment rarely arrives with dramatic revelation, but with quiet recognition. A softening, a letting go of the struggle. It might happen while watching sunlight move across a wall, noticing how patterns shift without effort, or in the space between breaths, when the constant monitoring of thoughts and feelings briefly ceases. In these moments, we catch glimpses of what lies beyond the prison walls. The turning point is not about breaking down barriers through force, but about understanding why they were built in the first place. It's about meeting our younger self, the one who made these survival decisions, with compassion rather than judgment. That child who learned to hide their anger wasn't being weak. They were being brilliant. They found a way to protect their relationships. The teenager who dissociated from painful experiences wasn't being cowardly. They were being resourceful. They discovered how to endure the unendurable. The prison wasn't built to punish us, but to protect us. The walls were erected by a self that knew no other way to survive. The bars were forged in moments when vulnerability felt like annihilation. Healing begins when we stop fighting the prison and start understanding its architecture. When we trace the patterns of avoidance back to their origins. When we sit with the exiled feelings without trying to fix them or make them go away. This is the alchemy of shadow work, transforming fear into curiosity, resistance into acceptance, fragmentation into wholeness. It's not about becoming someone new, but about becoming more fully who we already are. The most profound realization is that the parts of ourselves we've been guarding so fiercely are not monsters waiting to destroy us. They are wounded children asking to be seen. They are forgotten wisdom waiting to be remembered. They are aspects of our humanity that we mistakenly believed were incompatible with being loved. Liberation from self-imprisonment is not an event, but a process, a gradual unfolding, a slow remembering of what was always there. It begins with small acts of courage, allowing a forbidden feeling to surface without immediately pushing it away, noticing the impulse to dissociate and choosing to stay present instead, speaking a difficult truth where before there was only silence. These moments don't shatter the prison walls, but they create cracks where light can enter. And with enough light, we begin to see that the walls were never as solid as we believed. They were made of fear, and fear dissolves in the presence of compassionate awareness. The journey from prisoner to free person is not about escaping our history, but about integrating it, bringing the exiled parts home, welcoming the shadow as an essential aspect of our wholeness. We discover that the qualities we tried to hide, our vulnerability, our anger, our need, are not weaknesses to be overcome, but sources of depth and connection. Our sensitivity becomes our strength. Our capacity to feel deeply becomes our gateway to authentic living. The prison transforms from a place of confinement to a sacred space where healing occurs. The walls that once separated us from ourselves become the boundaries that define our wholeness. The silence that once felt oppressive becomes the stillness where we can hear our own truth. We realize that freedom was never about breaking out, but about breaking through. Not about leaving parts of ourselves behind, but about gathering all the fragments and remembering they were always part of the same whole. The key was never lost. It was in our hand all along, waiting for us to stop struggling long enough to notice its weight, waiting for us to understand that the only door that needed opening was the one to our own heart.